when you cloak that in the facade of I'm doing this for everyone else. I'm the good guy. I'm working myself to death and have dirty hands so that my wife can have this. And I think that winds up being a lot of bull. Welcome back to another Midweek Modern Craftsman. Today's podcast, I'm going to dig into two separate things. One is going to be moving forward, what this podcast can look like, the potential there, kind of this fork in the road where Nick and I are standing, and also a question that I received on a YouTube video that I thought was a very interesting question. Very forthright, and I'm going to dig into that question and my answer to that question. So that's what you can look forward to today. But first off, what I really want to do is I want to dig into this fork in the road where Nick and I are standing. What we want to do with the podcast, what direction we're heading, and it's not that we're, nobody fear that we're shutting the doors, turning off the lights. It's just that we've been doing this a really long time. And we want to ensure that we're not just doing the same thing because it's worked for a long time, right? If you're not growing, you're dying. If you're not testing potential opportunities, then you're probably not growing either. So what opportunities do Nick and I have? How can we create the best user experience? How can Nick and myself selfishly remain as engaged as possible? And Nick and I and Doug just got on a phone call this morning for an hour. We have all of these ideas up in the air. Some cost a lot of money. Some we can foot the bill ourselves. Some would require a heavier lift. We're trying to balance our time, our resources, the amount of money that we're willing to invest in this with the return, what we get out of it, what you guys get out of it, the impact that we can have. There's just so many things to consider. And I think a lot of you don't see the behind the scenes of this podcast and what it takes, and the traveling and the conversations offline and the prep work for the podcast and the lining up of the guests and the editing. It's not just sitting down and having a conversation with somebody and then that's it. It just magically appears. There's a lot that goes into this throughout the week. Traveling, creating content with our sponsors, our partners, ensuring that we are providing the value for them with analytics, with selling, with bringing on guests, with juggling schedules. There's just a lot that goes into this, and also just creating new content and having new conversations every single week for 8 years, every week, right? And I know that we miss weeks time to time, but when you think about the amount of time that we've invested in this, it's substantial. Like it could be a full-time job for a lot of people, and it is substantial. And how do we ensure that we're not just creating a ton of work for just to keep putting podcasts out there, right? So this is what we've been thinking. This is what we're diving into. These are some potentials that I want to gauge our listeners, and I want to see what you guys and girls think about this, because again, Nick and I aren't going to do anything without having some answers in place, but just to make sure that we're doing something we're excited about, and something that excites you and something that's valuable and engaging to you. I had the conversation with Nick and Doug where it's like, we can't just do stuff for the sake of doing it, where it's like, hey, this has worked for so long, let's keep doing it. We have huge lofty goals, but they also would cost us, $50,000, $100,000 a year more to produce. And I don't know if 8, 9, 10 years into this, I'm willing to just continue to chalk out money. And that's not a hit on anyone else, but like, are we at the point where we're going to go backwards and can begin or continue to concede more of our time, more of our resources, more of our money? Like, what's it look like? I feel like we should be at the point now where we're getting to do what we want to do. We're having the conversation with the people that we want to speak with, and our listeners are finding amazing value in that. So that's the goal for us. And we do have huge, lofty goals. But I don't know how realistic some of them are to be self-sustaining. And with everything else that we have going on in our lives. So just testing the waters, seeing what could potentially work. And I want to gauge your interest. And we'll be doing this probably more through some polling. But in the meantime, I'd love for you to shoot me an email, Tyler at trghomeconcepts.com. You could respond to an Instagram post that we make from this. You can shoot me a DM. You can email hello@moderncraftsman.co. I want to hear from you guys and girls, and I want your honest take on this, and I want to know what you would prefer to see moving forward. That being said, the format now is that I'm doing a midweek per week, right? So there's a fair amount of time just every week that I'm devoting to the midweek. So I'm pumping out a midweek per week. I think I might miss 2 a year, 3 a year max. I've done over 100 episodes, anywhere 30 to 45 minutes typically. Nick and I want to be doing a live workshop and Q&A once a week. Nick's goal has always been to do an N week once a week, but with his schedule, it's difficult to do. And then we're also looking to pump out a new podcast every single week, so that we're putting a lot out there, and it is consuming a ton of our time. We live in a ton of different spaces. We have our own businesses, our own families. We're not local to each other. So is this the best format? Is there a better format? So we've been discussing this for a couple of weeks now. We had another phone call today, and there's a million ways that we could make this truly amazing. And we have those ideas. A lot of what we want to do is overly ambitious. It would cost us a lot of money and a lot of time, and be really difficult to remain consistent. And I think the consistency is key with something like this, and we've proven that. So I know that I have a very loyal midweek following, and right now I'm putting out 4 midweeks a week. And the proposed idea, and again, this is a terrible idea, not set in stone, I'm not sure that I'm 100% on board with this right now. But instead of putting out 8-10 podcasts or long format pieces of content a month, what if we focused on 4 or 5? What if each month we picked a topic, right? So say we put out a yearly calendar where month 1 we're going to focus on finances, month 2 we're going to focus on systems, month 3 we're going to focus on work-life balance, month 4 we're going to focus on marketing, month 5 we're going to focus on mental health. What if we did that, and then we lined up our guests around that, right? Where we find somebody who lives in the mental wellness and mental health space and would be a really amazing guest. Maybe they've written a book. Maybe we recommend that book to you listeners to listen to or to read. And you have, a month in advance, 2 months in advance that you can do this. And then we have that author on or that guest on for the standard podcast. What if we do the live workshop, the Q&A based around the similar topic, right? Where we can generate some questions, we can get some user questions, we can just get on with our listeners and have a live workshop where we're digging into what we believe to be important, but then also real-time answering questions that you might have, or listening to experiences as you might have and digging into them based on this topic. My midweek would probably be not every week at that point, maybe every 2 weeks, maybe once a month, but it would be longer. It would be more dynamic. It would be more robust. So instead of having a 30-minute conversation, it might be an hour. It might be an hour and a half. There might be more prep work involved, maybe some deliverables involved, right? But if I'm spending 10 hours a month on that right now to put out 4 episodes, can I spend 10 hours a month to put out 1 more robust episode or 2 hour-long episodes? Does that work for you guys? Does it work if I bring a guest in and I interview a guest just with me, not with Nick, on that topic? These are kind of the conversations that and the potential opportunities that are intriguing to me. I think it allows us to really hone in on the guests that we want. We can line them up in advance. We can ensure that the conversation is based around their experience and their professional knowledge and expertise. To me, that's really important. So we're not just bringing a guest on and interviewing them about what they do and what their life looks like and what their business looks like. It could be, hey, this month is on scaling. We're going to have Brad Levitt on from AFT because he's grown his company from 1.5 to 50 employees. And what does that look like? It doesn't necessarily even need to be in the construction industry, but I think this opens up an opportunity to have a more curated podcast experience, but then give it to you in many different ways. Again, a midweek with just me, a live Q&A, a workshop with Nick and myself, and whoever wants to come on. If you want to send us questions in advance, we can answer them as well. If you can't be on that, then we'll release that. Nick and myself having that podcast where we unpack everything. Nick and myself and a guest who specializes and comes from whatever industry we choose to be the topic. Again, the idea is to maybe start with like one quarter. So we're going to pick 3 months worth of topics that hopefully we could gauge from our listeners, where it's like, hey, here are the proposed topics that we want to dig into over the next 12 months. What ones do you want to see? Maybe we send that out via email. Maybe we send that out through the newsletter, through Instagram, social, whatever it may be. But just to really to generate the content that really speaks to you and to give us more of a direction where we're not feeling out our guest as we go and then latching on to something that really speaks to us. I think it would just give us an opportunity to line guests up in advance to sell to better guests. And again, this is not an insult on any sort of guest, more of an insult on Nick and myself, that we don't have the time and the network of people that we can just get on and speak to their entire history and past and experience. It takes a lot of work for Nick and I to get that information when you're not known by everyone in the world. So I think bringing in some guests that people know who they are, that possibly they've written their book, they've seen a documentary that they've done, that would be ideal for me, to give you that unique perspective of that person who's devoted a lot of their life to one specific topic, industry, professional sector, whatever that may be. So that's kind of what I'm thinking now. And I proposed this to Nick and Doug, and we kind of came up with this idea. We would love to be able to do this in person. We would love to be able to go and visit people at their builds and speak to them. But really focusing, 4 to 5 pieces of content a month based on these specific topics that are curated by us and by you, the listener. So I would be curious to hear if you'd be interested in that, right? Would you be interested in less podcasts but higher quality, more well curated, probably planned out a little bit more with topics and guests that have been pre-vetted, pre-screened, so that you know who they are? You can ask us whatever appropriate questions. Again, are you opposed to me bringing in a guest for the midweek and interviewing them with just me, or do you prefer the solo setup? What types of content would you want us to choose? What types of topics? And if you don't like this, it's not as though, hey, this month doesn't apply to me. Because if we have a guest on or we do a podcast, it's not just, there's other things that come up. There's other aspects that we'll discuss, but a lot of our selections and the interview and the conversations that we had are going to be based on a specific topic, a specific industry, an area of the building industry, or a business, or a life, mental health, well-being, physical health, whatever it may be. I think that would be really cool. And I think at the end of the day, we have grown a lot over the years, but we've done a lot of the same. And I want to ensure that Nick and I are engaged in this just as much as you. And I don't just want to continue to put out these podcasts that everyone's putting out in the same outline, the same format that everyone's doing, because it just seems like we're going through the motions and there's not a ton of value. And if you don't listen to ours, you can go listen to somebody else who's going to have the same conversation with the same person. And it's just the same things over and over again. I'd like to be able to bring a different insight, a different perspective. And that's kind of what we're going for here. Like in a perfect world, I say I line up 3 months worth of content. We pick what we're going to talk about. We pick who our guests are. We pick what book is appropriate to read prior to that month, because we're going to dig into that. And it's our favorite book or our favorite topic on hospitality, on accounting, on work-life balance, on marketing, on scaling your business, whatever it may be. We'll line the guest up. The midweek will be revolved around that. We'll dive more into systems. We'll do the live Q&A. To me, that's like a really great plan, and we can test that for 3 months and see how that goes. And obviously, we can't start that this month because we want to get you guys involved with that, which will most likely be through email list and through the newsletter. But we want you guys to have access to who we're interviewing, to us, and I think that this is a really great way. But I'd love to know if you think that's a terrible idea. If you have better ideas, if there's a way that we could structure that that's better for you, I'd love to hear it. I really do want your insight. I want to know what works for you, because I selfishly, I don't want to just say what we're doing is not serving Nick and I anymore, so we want to make a change, and I don't care what you guys think. This is about us. No, it's not. It is about me. It's about what drives me, what helps me get out of bed every day, but it also is about you guys. Like you all, we wouldn't be anything without our listeners, without our supporters. You know, I got 5 emails over the weekend from people after listening to the last podcast. It's giving me their insight, ideas, perspective, reaffirming what we're doing. So I definitely, I want to hear from you. Even if it's just you posting a story where it's direct to camera and you're telling us your thoughts, so that I can see it from you, I can hear it from you. It would be really, really important, because at the end of the day, you guys are the reason why we show up each and every week. It's great conversations for us, but we owe it to our listeners. We owe it to our partners. We owe it to all of our supporters to continue to put out the highest quality of content and conversations that we can have. And I think that this might be a step in a different direction that's also the right direction. So let me know what you think. I'm interested to hear it. So the second half of this conversation is on, so if you guys aren't aware, we're on YouTube. A bunch of people watch the podcast through YouTube, which is really cool. Nick and I weren't getting to questions, so one of our editors, we had create a spreadsheet with all the questions that come in. Then Nick and I can go and check, and we can respond to these questions. So this question, which is a great question, came, I believe, based on one of our last episodes that Nick and I did, where Nick was basically discussing, like, he'll send me all of these social posts where it's like, you got to keep grinding, right? It's David Goggins, it's Alex Hormozi, it's Gary V, like that style, where it's like, work till you're dead, there's 24 hours in a day for a reason, all that stuff. And I used to get on board with that. And I still do to a certain extent. Like, I'm obviously running a business. I have a family. I have my own hobbies. I run part of a podcast business. I have my social side of the business where I'm traveling around the country and filming with all different types of companies. So I definitely, I'm not just sitting back and saying, don't work, you can't be driven. But what drives me now is very different than this Alex Hormozi, David Goggins, Gary V type of motivation. And so Nick and I were having this conversation where I was like, the quote, like, it's not supposed to be easy. If it were easy, everyone would do it. And I think that's a really strong motivator. It's very powerful. But at the same time, I do believe And I believe this, based on firsthand experience, that created an exacerbation of me continuing to bang my head against the wall because I thought that something would change. If I continued to outwork this, if I continued to outwork my competition, that things would change. And it brought me success. It helped develop a strong brand. It did lead to everything that I have today. But I also think that there's other ways of doing that. And I didn't need to push everything else aside. And there's luck, there's timing, there's a lot that goes into this. And maybe it would have taken me an extra year or two, but maybe I would have had a better lifestyle. Maybe I would have had more time with my family. Maybe I wouldn't have been as anxious. Maybe I wouldn't have been as stressed. I would have been able to treat employees better, clients better, my family better, myself better. There's all these things. So if you haven't listened to that podcast, check it out. It's the last one where Nick and I sit down and discuss like where the podcast stands, just us two recording, what we want to do moving forward, how we can create a really valuable podcast. But the question, and I'll just read it, Tyler, these highly driven businessmen, maybe they just love the game and live to solve the next challenge. Think Alex Hormozi style. If you'll excuse my bluntness, is you saying they are driven by ego, fame, etc., you just trying to justify yourself not doing what they are? I know this is a pointed question. I ask because I want to learn and better understand myself in this. So there's nothing wrong with that question. But I don't feel the need at this point to justify what I'm doing or what I'm not doing. And for years I did, and I think that led to me following or listening to my ego, right? And ego isn't a bad term. A lot of times we look at it as a negative term, but it's not necessarily a bad term. You just have to ensure that you are not, every decision is not being made by ego. So the way that this relates to me, and that I'm not allowing my ego and myself, my wants to take over for everything, and I allow other aspects of my life to weigh in on those decisions rather than just me. But for years, it was just me, but I didn't tell myself it was just for me. I had convinced myself that it was for everyone else. So I don't feel that I need to justify what I'm doing or what I'm not doing any longer. And what had happened is when I was younger and when I was building my business and I was looking to build my brand and I was working 100 hours a week, I told myself what these people are telling myself, that you got to grind through it. You put the work in now, it'll be better. Sleep when you're dead, like work hard now, you'll have a better life later on. And I told myself this was for my family. This is for my kids. This is for my wife. This is for my clients. This is for the business, for the brand. And it wasn't until, there's many things, but like years later that I realized I was chasing a lot. And most of what I was chasing was not actually for my family. It wasn't actually for my clients. It wasn't to build my brand. At the end of the day, it was because it's what I wanted. And I am confident of that selfishly. Like, I wanted the accolades. My ego wanted to be recognized. I wanted to be acknowledged. I wanted to be known as the best at what I was doing. And I would work myself to death to do that. And I would tell myself that if you want to get to the top, you got to put this work in. And there were a lot of things that I was doing incorrectly and wrong, and I muscled my way through them. And I think I can't go back and say that, it wasn't worth it, because I'm in a position now that it all worked out. But I don't, there was a lot of mistakes that I made and things that I did that I probably didn't need to do for years on end, that created a lot of issues in my life, with my family, with my own mental health, with my own well-being. that at the end of the day, I hid in this facade of I'm doing this for my family, I'm doing this for my clients, I'm doing this for my employees so that they have work. But at the end of the day, it was really and truly only about me. And that is where I want people to be careful. You can be a highly driven businessman or woman. You can love the game. You can love to be able to solve the next problem, and you could admit that and understand that, and everyone can understand that. There's nothing wrong with that. Where the trouble lies in my position and for my stance is when you cloak that in the facade of I'm doing this for everyone else. I'm the good guy. I'm working myself to death and have, dirty hands so that my wife can have this. And I think that winds up being a lot of bullshit. Um, I think that's where my reaction to this kind of stems out of. And I've done the hustle. I've ground myself into the ground, literally. I've wound up in the hospital twice from overworking myself. And basically depleting my body's natural adrenaline to the extent that I had a minor allergic, or I had like a minor allergy to something that 99.9% of days was not an issue. But on these days when I was exposed to it and I was that run down and that physically depleted, my body didn't have any natural adrenaline to fight it. And I went into anaphylactic shock twice, and got carted out of my house on a stretcher in front of my kids. And I realized at that point that they didn't want this. Like, this isn't something they signed up for. If they had the choice, they would have me home. They wouldn't have me carted out of the house. They wouldn't have me working till 1, 2 in the morning. They wouldn't have me be missing dinners and missing talent shows and athletic events and being gone in the morning before they leave to school. Like, that was all for me. That wasn't for them. If my kids and my wife had the choice, they wouldn't choose that. They don't have, they're not reaping enough rewards out of it, me being a contractor, that it's like, oh, it's worth not seeing my dad. So I think that's where a lot of where I kind of call bullshit on that. I would tell myself I was doing this for my family. But when my wife called me and I was at work and she asked me if I could go pick the kids up, or I could do this, or she had a flat tire, could I come and fix it? And it was like, no, I need to get to this point on this job. I'm already behind schedule. Like, how was I doing that for my family if I was putting my clients first? And at the end of the day, me putting my clients first was creating self-worth in my own mind, because I was serving my clients, right? Because that's how I created any sort of identity and self-worth for myself, by treating my clients well, by doing amazing work, by over delivering on every aspect of that project. But my wife would ask me for something. My kids would ask me to go outside and ride bikes with them. And nope, I got to do this. I got to get this to a client. Like, my kids aren't choosing that. That was not for my family. I was doing that all for me. When the tables had turned and I was with my family, whether I was on vacation, I was out to dinner, it was the weekend, I was heading to practice a sports event. If a client called me and needed something from me, I would drop everything to go serve that client. And again, this was not for my family. Realistically, it wasn't even for my clients. It was to make me feel good, to make me feel as though I was successful, that people needed me, that I was a valuable person. I was an asset to these people. And none of that really was for my clients, and none of that was for my family. Yeah, there was a paycheck associated with it, but it was not because they wanted me to do it. It was to feed my own ego. And there's nothing from a businessman perspective of that. If I were to have done all that stuff and just said, like, yeah, this is what I want to do, this makes me feel good, at the end of the day, I'd rather go work for my customers and help them than help my family. Like, I can't tell you what's right and wrong in life, but if that's what makes you happy and that's what makes you wake up every day, like, I can't tell you that's wrong. If that's right to you, that's right to you. But I was lying to myself about that. Um, I realized that so much of what I was doing and where I was looking to get the fulfillment that I was searching for was never, ever really obtained. And I've learned that later on in life. And I joke about it now, right? Where I'm like, if I just place top 50 in a dirt bike race, I won't have to go out and practice as much. I'd like, that'll be good for me. And I get 45th. And then it's like, well, I kind of want to get top 30 now. And usually it lasts like a couple of weeks and then, or a race or two. And then I'm like, oh, I want to get top 30. And then I get top 30. And then it's like, I'm good. That's it. Like, I don't need more than that. How much more do you want me to go? I'm almost 40 years old. And then a little bit of time goes on. I'm like, now I need to get top 20. And then I need to get top 10. And this is called the arrival fallacy. And this is something that I realized and I joke about later on in life now because I see it, but it's like so much of what I was doing at that point in my life and so much of what these guys are pitching on social media and Gary Vee and Alex Hormozi and Goggins and all of that crap is that you're going to be able to get to a point and that fulfillment will come once you reach that point, once you have that much money in your bank account, once you can run 100 miles without stopping, once you can work 24 hours in a day and not need sleep, once you have a certain amount of money in your bank account and you don't need to work, you don't need to retire. And the problem is that for me, that destination, that goalpost just kept shifting. Every win would just lead to a new benchmark, a new goalpost. And I was in this trap that I was convincing myself if I sacrificed everything now, the next version would be better. But the problem is I'm still at that next version. Oh, the person who came up with every goal in the first place, the mindset, the mentality, the insecurities, they're all there. So even if I get a win, even if I reach a certain amount of money in my bank account, even if I place top 10, even if I were to place one overall, now I would need another. Now I need two in a row. Now I need three in a row. I need to work on myself more so than anything else. Like that's a me problem that I need to work on being present. I need to work on appreciating things. I need to just be okay and work on being content and comfortable in my own skin. And like I said, I can laugh about it now. Like I placed 15th overall my last two races, and my wife's like, oh, so like she'll laugh like, oh, you're good enough. Like 15th's good enough now. And immediately it's like, no, absolutely not. Like I want to get better. I want to get top 10. And she's like, you're just sick. Like you're sick in the head at this is what drives you. And I just make sure that I do that in a healthy way now. Like with the racing and stuff is fine, but with work where it leads to stress, me putting too much time into a job and not being able to capture the appropriate amount of money for it, I need to be smarter. I need to let go of the ego. I need to be comfortable with myself. I need to ensure that my insecurities are not driving much of what I'm doing. And I think when I work on those things and I'm honest with myself about why I'm doing things and not cloaking that in a false sense of love for my family or love for my clients, or I'm doing this for everyone else. And I'm just open and transparent and honest with myself that, yeah, this is something that I'm doing for me. I think that I'm in a much better place. I think that when I feed my ego and I validate my identity through TRG, it can lead to successes, but I don't know if it leads to happiness. I think that it winds up being a crutch that prolongs a lot of the suffering, where if you took the crutch away, you'd have to work on the root of the problem. You'd have to heal. You'd have to get the leg better before you can walk on it. And I think that the crutch is like a short-term fix to keep you moving in the direction that you want without actually addressing the issue or fixing what needs to be fixed. And that is what I'm afraid of when a lot of people hear all of these people talking online and trying to motivate them to get out and just outwork your next person. Yeah, you have to work hard. like, if you want to be elite at anything, you have to work hard, but do not allow that to be the driver for everything that you do. Do not allow that to prolong and exacerbate bad habits, or I guess deficiencies within your business, or flaws within your model, because you're just going to grind out these flaws and make it better. Like, no, address the flaw, address why you want to get there. Have those conversations with yourself. So it was a really great question. Got me thinking about a ton, thinking about myself, thinking about where I've come from, where I've been, what my life looks like now. And I will be the first to tell you where I am now, and understanding this about myself and not lying to myself, and creating some boundaries with not only my own ego, but with clients, and serving the needs of others, and ensuring that if I'm doing it, it's for the right reasons, and it's not just to strengthen my own identity or my own needs. Because I think if you're depending on somebody else's happiness or making somebody else happy, you're probably never going to be happy for yourself. So I think that when I did that, and this was probably right around when Rachel's dad had gotten sick, so almost 5 years ago, 4.5 years ago, my life has changed substantially. I'm much happier. I am far less stressed. I still have my moments. I still feel overwhelmed at times. I still, there's times where I lash out at my family, where I lash out at my friends, where, I get frustrated and I get upset. And there's times when I feel afraid and I feel panicked, but it's fewer and far between. I'm much more comfortable in my own skin. I understand what makes me happy. I understand what I need in life. And I understand that grinding it out is not going to make me happy and not going to make me successful entirely. That there's other things that I can work on. So, yeah, that's it. I hope that you guys enjoyed that. Again, let me know about the podcast. If that new structure is intriguing to you, if that's something that you would find interested in, if you're like, nah, you're trying to fix something that's not broken, I'd love to hear from you. Tyler at trghomeconcepts.com. Shoot me an email, post a story, tag me in it, tag Modern Craftsman, shoot us an email, hello@moderncraftsman.co. Whatever it is, I appreciate everyone hanging around. Appreciate you listening. Appreciate all the support. I want to make sure that whatever I do moving forward, I am not jeopardizing the support and the relationship and all the listenership that I have over the years. So I want to make sure that I'm doing right by you. All right, guys and girls, I will catch you next week.